Should Italian parents teach their kids to love Italy and be thankful for Italy?
Yeah.
Should
Or
Japanese parents teach their kids to be patriotic and appreciate living in Japan?
Nigerian.
And it doesn't feel controversial to say yes to those.
Yeah. And so if you do think the answer is yes to those, but you're uncomfortable with American patriotism, you need to ask yourself why. Erin, I have a serious question for you. Should we teach our kids to love our country?
Yes.
Christian nationalists right here, folks. My goal was to out Erin, expose her Christian nationalism, and you heard it first right here from her lips.
You are ridiculous. Oh,
that's not a good response to a legitimate accusation.
What do you mean by Christian nationalist?
Oh, good question, Erin. And folks, there's all kinds of claims of Christian nationalism out there. Pretty much anything and everything can be thrown under that label. And so I'm obviously being facetious here and sarcastic. But you would argue, and I would argue, that if you love your country and want what's in maybe the best interest of your country, that's not Christian nationalism. And actually we should, or do you think it's good to teach our kids to love their country?
I think so. And I would call it patriotic. And I think, yeah, it's appropriate to teach your children to love what's good, to appreciate and have gratefulness for things that they ought to, and being appreciative and grateful to live in America is appropriate, because there is so much that's good about America, about our history, about people who have started the country and made a difference throughout. There's so many good people, none who are perfect. And actually our kids, I think, learn a lot from knowing that too. But it's appropriate to teach our kids to be grateful for the things they ought to be grateful for. And one of them is to be an American. That's a privilege. That's a good thing.
Yeah. And if someone questions that, because I think we get a lot of that in the culture, not as much amongst Christians. I think there's a sense of a healthy patriotism in a lot of Christians. But Christians, there are a lot of Christians out there who are influenced by this, what we might call a kind of a critical theory mood, right? This idea that really carves the world up into different groups, primarily the oppressor oppressed categories, those with power, those without, those who are marginalized, and takes those groups and opposes them. And then says this group with power, they are the oppressors. They've exploited people, and it is therefore morally justified to repudiate those people, to look down on those people. And that's where I think some Americans feel like it's okay to get down and be down on our country, to simply criticize it, to not be patriotic, because I don't know, we're the big dog in the world. We've exercised a lot of power. We have a lot of power. But you, before we started filming, asked a really good question. Okay, how about other countries? Like, should Italians be enthusiastic and love their country?
Should Italian parents teach their kids to love Italy and be thankful for Italy?
Yeah.
Should
or
Japanese parents teach their kids to be patriotic and appreciate living in Japan?
Nigerian.
And it doesn't feel controversial to say yes to those.
Yeah. And so if you do think the answer is yes to those, but you're uncomfortable with American patriotism, you need to ask yourself why. What's the rub there? And what we want to say is, hey, a thoughtful patriotism is a good thing, particularly in a world in a worldview that says all cultures are not the same, and all cultures do not promote good at the same level. I mean, there's this multiculturalism that we've been, soaking in for 20, 30, 40, 50 years that kind of says, hey, all cultures are equally valid. All cultures are equally good. But if we believe in objective moral standards, it's clear there are some cultures that are not as morally good as others.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some cultures where evil is promoted more than other cultures. Now, that's not to then turn around and say, hey, our culture is perfect. Our culture, American culture, is the Christian culture. Because, I mean, it's probably problematic to say Christian culture in an unqualified way, because in one sense, depending on how you mean that, there is no Christian culture. Every culture is filled with fallen human beings, and those fallen human beings are going to have sinful patterns, sinful ideas, or values that are going to become embedded in the culture. So there's no perfectly Christian culture. But we would also say, at the same time, there are certain cultures and certain countries that embrace ideas and values that are more consistent with a Christian worldview, with Scripture. Mm-hmm. And there's a clear argument to be made that is the case for the United States of America.
Yeah, I think a great way to teach just practically. So how would you show this to kids? And they'll actually realize it without us having to give a lecture about it, is by exposing them particularly to how Christians are treated in other places around the world. And we do this by our subscription to Voice of the Martyrs magazine, which we've talked about before on the podcast. But if you read to your kids every once in a while an article about the Christians in Nigeria, for example, your kids will grow in appreciation for America, where we get to go to church every Sunday without worrying about our lives being taken, for example. And so even that, just in small ways, they can see, oh yeah, in America, we don't have to worry about some of these basic things that we just take for granted.
Yeah.
And of course, you can do this from reading Christians in history too, but even just today. And
looking at our system of government. I mean, our system of government finds its roots in Christian ideas about the sinfulness of man, the need for human accountability, the view of power and how power can be a corruptive thing. And that's why we don't have a democracy. Mm-hmm. We have a constitutional republic, or a representative republic. And this is informed. Our system of government is informed by a Christian worldview. And so these are important things to communicate to our kids. And we thought, hey, what better week than this one, if you're listening this week when the podcast comes out. And if you aren't, well, hey, that's your problem. And, look, if you don't want to, if you're not chomping at the bit every week to hear Erin's sweet voice and my authoritative voice, then, that's your problem. Word. So, hey, you got to grow.
So even if they are listening after the 4th of July, which is what we're talking about in this episode, we are actually suggesting that these were things that should maybe just be a part of the culture of your family, not just on the 4th of July. Of course, the 4th of July is a uniquely American holiday for good reason. But hopefully some of the things we talk about today, you could maybe just incorporate into your family's culture a little bit here and there throughout the year even.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's like a lot of things where you want to say, hey, it's obviously Mother's Day and Father's Day. We might want to celebrate in some special ways, mom and dad, especially on Father's Day. Fathers just get the short shrift on this.
Do you?
Yeah, I think I've got, we should do a podcast. I've got like 100 ideas on how to enhance Father's Day. And so we'll get there. But we would also say, hey, in addition to that special day, yeah, you should be incorporating the celebration of your dad or your mom or whatever throughout the year. And I've got about 1,000 ideas for that one. But in the same way, hey, the teaching of American history is something we want to do throughout. But this is a great opportunity to highlight and to spend time being thankful for the country that we're in, right? And if you're listening to this from another country, doing that with your own country and saying, what are the things that we can look at about our country that are good? And of course, also acknowledging
and grieving, maybe.
And grieving the bad things. But those, we don't have to look. I guess here's the problem that I'm thinking about with the way we talk about our country, the United States, or a lot of the discussion in our culture goes, this way, like, hey, look at the sins and then that defines us, right? And that's the only way you define it. You look at it simply through this lens. And we say, no, actually, I think a Christian worldview would want us to look at both the good and the bad and to view it appropriately, but also not to be moral relativists and to say there are moral standards. And you know what? It's not a problem to argue that the United States or Great Britain or, certain other countries may get closer to that standard of moral goodness than other countries because of the Christian ideas that are kind of baked into the culture. And now, again, that's not to say that other people and other cultures are less valuable. And that's where the Christian worldview comes in and says, no, you can't say that either, because every human being is made in God's image and has value and dignity. So this is why I love the Christian worldview. It sheds light on everything. It makes sense, the best sense out of, giving us an account for the way the world really is. Okay, so we want to just give you some quick ideas on how we might take this day, the 4th of July, and celebrate with our kids.
And not just barbecue and swim and do water balloons and kind of celebrate it. I think the way most people just celebrate it now.
Yeah. Well, I think, you've struggled with just kind of using as opportunity to drink a lot that day, to lose,
Oh my gosh.
by the time it's noon, honey.
Kungle. Oh, you're my word.
No.
Audience, he's lying to you. He just loves to make fun of me. As anyone who's listened to more than one podcast knows.
I make fun of, it's not make fun of you. Please don't characterize it that way. It's a love language.
Oh, right.
Sarcasm is a love language. It just means
and when
I care.
Yeah, I feel that. So I think, thinking about how can we infuse the holiday with some meaning for our kids, especially as Christians, because we want to teach our kids gratefulness. We want our kids to have knowledge of the time and place that God has placed them in. And I was thinking, actually, when you were talking about different countries and things, and part of, I think, explaining the Christian worldview and understanding it for our kids too is, Acts 17, Paul says, God has chosen the time and place that all of us are in. And so if you are American or our Canadian friends, if you're Canadian, God has placed you in Canada, in America, in this time and place.
It's a tough claim to justify. God has placed you in Canada. Because that simply raises the problem of evil and suffering.
Oh,
if God is good and loving and all-knowing, why would he place people in Canada? That's specifically...
Tim and Stacy, I'm so sorry.
I am saying that specifically for Tim and Stacy who live in Canada.
Okay, so...
We're praying for you guys.
So we live in America, being aware, and we've talked about this, we'll talk about it again. Just this civic knowledge, this knowledge of government, what's going on, all these things. We just talked about it in the podcast about watching the debate, and wasn't that fun to watch the debate?
That's right. We should have given a little update here. I mean, because
the debate was
all hell broke loose at the Kunkel home after watching the debate. I mean,
and
fists
wasn't
were
it a good
swinging.
it was a great exercise
I
in
had
logic.
to pull you off of like 3 people. You were like so mad.
No, it was an interesting night for sure. But so telling our kid, we were placed in this time and in this place. And so it's appropriate that we know things about the country we're in, that we would have, that we would want to be people who are knowledgeable, aware, civically minded, care about our community. So 4th of July, of course, if you have little kids, you just start by saying it's America's birthday. Like, this is our country's birthday.
Oh, that's a controversial claim, Erin.
Oh, because of the 1619 project. Well, I'm okay. It's controversial.
I just want people to be aware that
the truth is that the 4th of July is America's birthday.
We would make an argument that, July 4th, 1776.
So we want to infuse it with meaning. So what do I mean? Does that mean like all day you have to sit and like read things to your kids? And no, what?
Yeah, no.
I
was gonna say no. I was gonna. Well, I mean, I just wanted to highlight you have in the past had our kids dress up like American presidents or figures from American history all day long. So you have struggled with kind of going overboard.
No.
So remember, I mean, last year you had Micah dressed as George Washington from 8 a.m. until like midnight.
That is ridiculous.
And
he's 22 years old.
I know. That's why I thought that was weird. I thought that was really weird that you would do that. So
okay, so we're going to give you some ideas and resources and things. How can you infuse meaning into the 4th of July for your kids so they grow up knowing some things and being able to be grateful for the country they live in?
Okay, so we need to go through this list of resources. But before we get into resources, I mean, speaking of resources, just in case it's not on your radar, people, the MAVEN conference, our last MAVEN conference of the year is happening in September the 7th. And we think the MAVEN conference is one of the best resources in the history of humanity.
My word.
No, it really, in terms of conferences, it is one of the best conferences out there. And we just get that feedback consistently. We do it with excellence, but we take important, often very challenging topics that the culture is throwing at Christians, and we help you, we equip you and train you to think carefully, to think with the Christian worldview, and then practically how to engage. And this year's theme is on the authority of Scripture. And we have got to realize that it is no longer enough to simply say, oh yeah, the Bible is an authority. Oh yeah, the Bible is God's word. We have got to undergird that with the reasons why. A very thoughtful, here is why Scripture is authority. And we have 6 main sessions that are going to help do that. In fact, for this Texas conference, we've got some incredible enhancements this year that we've added. We're changing it from a Friday night to all day Saturday. Rather than Friday night, Saturday, 2 days, we're going all day Saturday, 9 to 5, to make it a little bit easier for people to get there. We are broadening the audience because we've had so many students that come. So this conference is for adults and for students. In fact, we've got special parenting tracks for the adults. We've got a special student track for the students during our breakouts, and we've got some other things that we're planning for the students as well. So even if you had a youth group, you wanted to bring your youth group, we also have an apologetics track, a culture track, a theology track. So there's going to be all kinds of things that we cover. Anyway, join us in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, September the 7th for our last MAVEN conference of the season. You will definitely be proud of yourself for going. I guess is a way to put it. You won't be disappointed, and Erin will offer a money back guarantee if you are. Go to mavenconferences.com, get all the information there, register. We hope to see you there. Okay, so that was a great transition to that commercial, honey. Thank you for that opportunity. Mm-hmm. Back to resources.
Back to
Erin,
4th of
give
July.
Us resources.
Okay, so I'm going to break it down into a few different areas and you could, if you've never done anything like this, you can choose one area and start with that. So one way to teach kids about America, about America's birthday, the 4th of July, is through songs. So you can pull up all kinds of Spotify, Apple Music. Of course, on YouTube, there's great versions of all kinds of American songs. So for one, the national anthem. If your kids don't know the national anthem,
shame on you.
You should
move to another country now, please.
You should teach it to them. My suggestion is pulling up on YouTube the best version of it, which is Whitney Houston. Oh my word.
Yes, Erin is a child of the 80s and 90s. Whitney
No shame.
Houston. Yeah, half the people are like,
love Whitney
who is
Houston.
Whitney Houston?
Oh my gosh. At the gym the other day, they played a Whitney Houston song. I could not have been happier.
Was it Bodyguard?
No. Oh, no. Oh, my word.
What's the theme song for
No,
Bodyguard?
it's I Want to Dance with Somebody. I mean, that was just classic Whitney. I was so happy. Okay, anyway, so back to Whitney Houston. Look up, Google National Anthem Whitney Houston. If you haven't heard this version, shame on you.
Yeah, she was incredibly talented.
You
singer.
can play this while you're eating breakfast on the 4th of July. I mean, just simple ways you can pull it up, have it playing on a speaker while you're outside and kids are on the slip and slide. I mean, so play the song. So National Anthem is one. Our Country 'Tis of Thee. Great American song. The Battle Hymn of the Republic. These are all songs that our kids should know. And so use the 4th of July as a time to make an American playlist and just teach your kids some of the songs. America the Beautiful. There's all kinds of American folk songs that are just so fun. If you live in the South, there's tons of Southern folk songs. But anyway.
Songs that celebrate the goodness of the U.S.
Yeah, and the cultures and all the things. So it especially folk songs. I'm thinking it's a great way to teach kids about different parts of American culture.
Yeah,
too.
no, I was going to say you're actually missing one of the best. I would add to this list.
What?
"Party in the USA" by Miley Cyrus.
God.
End the time.
No.
Hey, have Whitney Houston blasting national anthem.
Okay,
and at the end,
here's what you do.
Party in the USA.
If your kids know Party in the USA and they don't know the national anthem.
Oh, okay. Shame on you. Now move out of the country. Is that what you're saying?
Now you have some homework to do.
Okay. All right. Good. So songs is a good resource.
Is one of the ways we teach our kids to be patriotic and to teach them about America. Okay. Books. So I could talk about this for a long, long time, but I won't. So I'm going to name a few books that I think, again, you can't order all these and have them there by the 4th of July. Although, I don't know, maybe Amazon sometimes is like one day.
If you are a listener to the Maven Parent Podcast, Erin and I sincerely hope that you find tremendous value in this podcast. We hope that it has equipped you to not just be a more thoughtful and more effective parent, but just to be a thoughtful Christian who can navigate the culture yourself, and then also to guide those who you're discipling. So we hope that you are equipped through this podcast. We hope that you're challenged, but you're also motivated and inspired and encouraged. And we want to encourage you that if you find value in this, that you would help us continue to build and grow our podcast. And not only the podcast, but the larger work of Maven. And so I want to remind you that we are in the midst of a campaign that's been funded by some generous donors. We have some Maven donors who have given a $65,000 matching grant. And we are really counting on our Maven family to help match that. And so we want to encourage you to make a generous donation to the work of Maven. Take what we're doing with the Christian worldview, with biblical truth, and help us to reach a much larger audience, because Christian parents, Christian educators, Christian leaders need help in this cultural moment. So go to maventruth.com, and in the right-hand top corner of the website, you'll see the donate button. And go to the donate button and contribute today to the work of Maven and become a partner with us in spreading biblical truth. Okay, Erin, why don't you start with the books for the youngest of ages and then go through the older ones? Give us the titles. Honey, I'm going to put some parameters on here. You cannot give us 10-minute descriptions of each book.
Okay.
Just give the titles and let the folks do their homework.
Okay. They're going to see me exhibit self-control. Okay, here we go. So these are board books. So you could read these to little kids and
they'll be bored.
And no.
Oh, no, BOARD.
Yes.
Oh, that's why they're called board
hold them
books.
in their little hands
All right.
and
Just wanna
not rip the
clarify.
pages. So these are American Virtues for Kids. And there's a George Washington one, an Abraham Lincoln one that we have, and a Benjamin Franklin one. I think there's even more. The book's a little poem, and they learn kind of some of the myths about these great men in American history. So it's the story of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, all that. These are cute little board books that our kids loved. And actually, recently I was trying to get rid of them, not like throw them away, but pass them on. And our 12-year-old was like, Mom, absolutely not. I love these books. So I was like, okay, I won't get rid of them.
Okay, so that's the youngest of kids.
Okay. Okay. And then this author is their names are hard to say. The last name is Delary. So
DAULAIRE.
They have written
Ingrid and Edgar
Delary. If you look up the last name, you'll find them. So they wrote a series of children's books. They wrote these a long time ago, and mostly the way you know that is because the illustrations are so beautiful. And anyway, so they wrote a book on Pocahontas. They wrote a book on Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. These are a little bit longer picture books.
This one won, the Abraham Lincoln one, won the Caldecott Medal.
Yeah, they're beautiful children's books and a wonderful way to learn about some of the different men and women in history. Okay, that one, we have a book on the American Revolution. These kind of books can be kids, especially that are 7, 8, 9, that want to flip through books kind of on their own.
And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you get to see the pictures of the inside of the book. So
speaking of 4th of July, for example, look at this book. It has the famous painting of the signing of the Declaration, and then it has a copy of the Declaration, what it looked like. So this one has flaps and all kinds of stuff. So that's an option. Jean Fritz is the author of this book that's called Can't You Make Them Behave, King George? So, of course, this is a story of America being a colony and then King George trying to get us to listen to him. Jean Fritz is an author who wrote a lot of children's books on American history. So all her stuff is very good. And then lastly, I'll just hold up a couple. So, and actually this leads well to my next one, which is poetry. But this is a children's book that puts basically illustrations to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, Paul Revere's Ride. And so you can read the poem, Paul Revere's Ride, and it has pictures and stuff to go with it. So I always like to do that. There's books that have the Pledge of Allegiance, and it'll have illustrations to go with that. We have this beautiful version. I found it at a used bookstore, but I'm sure they're out there. Actually, most of these books I found at used bookstores. This one is a beautiful illustrated copy of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So you could read that.
And all it does is the text is the
text
Gettysburg
is the speech,
Address.
Is Lincoln's speech, and then it's just these beautiful chalk drawings. And so you might be thinking, Gettysburg Address, what does that have to do with the 4th of July? Well, that's something you could read, again, just to teach them about the country. It doesn't just have to be about the Declaration of Independence that we're actually celebrating on the 4th. But so books is another thing we can do to teach our kids patriotism.
Yeah, and we also have a copy of the Constitution in a little pamphlet form.
And the Declaration.
And included is the Declaration of Independence. Mm-hmm. Or one thing we got for the kids, I think, on a trip to D.C. a while back is... And again, if you're watching, you'll be able to see this, but it's a kind of a facsimile of the Declaration of Independence on, what do you call it, like this parchment paper. And it just kind of, that's the kind of thing that you could, especially for younger kids, you could pull out on the 4th of July, set it out, have it there so it's visible.
Mm-hmm.
It's an artifact
Yeah.
of culture that helps point us to the ideas
Yeah.
in the culture. And so taking this, and then even as simple, it could just be as simple as, hey, print out a copy of the Declaration of Independence and just read that in the morning
Mm-hmm.
to remind your family of what it is that we are celebrating on this day.
Or read a small part of it as the prayer, not as your prayer, but like before your prayer over dinner or something, And if your neighborhood is hanging out and over and other people are over to grill with you, then what a great opportunity to remind everyone who's there of the gift of living in America and what we're celebrating on the 4th of July. When you hold up that souvenir copy, that leads me to another thing that I was going to talk about, which is National Treasure. So this copy is basically the one in National Treasure. He goes to the gift shop at the archives, and I think that's where our kids got this one. So watch things like the first National Treasure. It's all about the Declaration of Independence. You learn so much just from that movie. Another thing you could watch with your kids, maybe on the night of the 4th of July or maybe
Braveheart?
July 3rd. No, not Brave. Oh my word! Any excuse to watch
If you're
Braveheart.
If you're Scottish, then watch Braveheart.
Then definitely watch Braveheart. The HBO did a series called John Adams.
Oh yes,
and
excellent.
The John Adams series, especially the first couple of episodes, which is really the beginning of America, are fantastic. And actually, we'll link in the show notes to a clip. There's a clip on YouTube that just shows the scene of Thomas Jefferson presenting John Adams and Benjamin Franklin the first kind of sketch of the Declaration of Independence, or maybe it was after he took some of their edits. But anyway, it shows them reading it and being stunned by the beauty of the Declaration. So that's something you can watch. So you have teenagers, watch something like that, and that might be something like, hey, let's have popcorn, dessert, and watch a movie on the 4th of July, and make it something that will actually teach them a little bit about our country too. Other things to watch on YouTube. There is a version of the reading of the Declaration of Independence that's kind of hosted by Morgan Freeman, who has the most amazing voice in the world, and you just want to listen to him read anything. So Google that. Actually, we could put a link to that in the show notes too. So listen to a reading of the Declaration of Independence. The Gettysburg Address. I recently read Ronald Reagan's farewell address. That would be a great thing to have your kids listen to. You could read the Martin Luther King's letters from a Birmingham jail. All of these things are teaching our children about our country and a reason to be thankful for where we are today. So songs, books, watching things, poems, as I mentioned. One poem I didn't mention. Can I mention one more?
Yes, last one.
Okay, last one. So Phillis Wheatley is one of my favorite American poets, and she was a slave who was freed later on. She was educated by her master's wife. She was called a house slave, so she lived in the house. And anyway, she was educated, and obviously God ordained that because she had a brilliant mind. Anyway, she is an amazing poet, but her poem, His Excellency General Washington, it is for older kids. Actually, adults like myself, you have to read it several times before you even understand it. But His Excellency General Washington would be a wonderful poem to read on 4th of July.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of different arts and things we can bring in to celebrate.
Right. And I know, Erin, you would just be able to go on and on for the next hour listing the specifics, but I think we've given folks a good overview. So thinking about songs, books, poems, documents, go use YouTube. The overall idea is, hey, be intentional. Take a holiday like this to be intentional, to teach a thoughtful patriotism, a thankfulness for the U.S., and the good things that God has been able to do through our country, ideas that are consistent with Christianity. I mean, I think this is where you could take a line from the Declaration of Independence, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And that can prompt a prayer of thankfulness and a petitionary prayer that we would continue to strive towards that ideal, right? As an imperfect country. The idea is that let's be intentional in taking this opportunity. And there might be some parents out there who are saying, look, I just don't feel like I'm educated enough myself. That's okay. Learn with your kids. But I did want to highlight, if you want some good free resources on American history, Hillsdale College has a number of free video courses that you can watch. You can sign up for them, access them on from the Revolution to the Constitution, lots of stuff that's good, solid material to educate yourself. And it's really that knowledge of the truth about our country, about our founders, about our values that can really foster thankfulness. And so that's why we want to be intentional, help our kids develop a thoughtful patriotism.
MAVEN exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.